All right, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us. My name is Kelsey Hamilton. I'm a WHO, class of 2013, and I'm on the board of the UVA Club of Charlottesville. We had a fantastic response to this event. We had to cut registration off at, I think, 125 different addresses, 200 something flights of gelato that PK and her team put together and got out to you guys. So this was just fantastic. We'll get started, but I'd like to highlight a few technical aspects of this virtual program. As you saw, as you signed in, this Zoom session is being recorded. It'll be available for people to, oops, I'm sorry. My dog is joining us as well. It'll be available for you guys to rewatch or, to pull up if you get interrupted, I believe starting tomorrow. Your mic and camera have automatically been muted due to distractions like my dog running around. I will also mute myself shortly as soon as we get through this intro. But if you do have questions during the event, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So please go ahead and click that and type your questions for PK in there, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible throughout the presentation. So I hope everyone enjoys the tasting, and now I'd like to introduce PK. So PK is also a WHO, class of 2005, and the owner of Splendora's Gelato Shop on the Downtown Mall. Splendors is one of my favorite stops on the Downtown Mall and has been since my first year at UVA, when my friends and I and future roommates would make a special trip downtown for our birthdays that always involved gelato. That was our birthday dessert of choice. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we look forward to visiting in person when things are back to normal. But in the meantime, we're excited to bring Splendoras to all of you. And extremely thankful to PK for putting together this menu, delivery schedule, and presentation for us. COVID-19 has hit small businesses especially hard, and our fantastic local business owners like PK have shown extreme resourcefulness in staying open and continuing to serve our community safely. And a small silver lining on some of the very persistent storm clouds this past few months have been that because local businesses are getting creative and looking for ways to expand businesses as normal operations are disrupted, we're able to do special events like this. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to PK.
No. Technology.
I can hear you.
Okay.
All you, PK.
All right, sorry. This is why I make gelato and I don't do business things. Thank you, Kelsey, for that introduction. And thank everyone for signing up, supporting this local business, and also for your patience today, because Monday's deliveries went great and today's were slightly disastrous. So just to add on to the intro that Kelsey gave me, Splendors has been around since 2004. I started there in March 2005. So I've been there quite a while. I've only owned it for, it'll be 10 years in June. The original owners, Spax and Andrea, are kind of UVA alums. They're both Darden alums. So there's no planet where I would run this business without their support. So I'm just really grateful for that part. And let's get to the gelato. I've got some here too. So if you kept them in the thing, you're welcome to do that. Just keep an eye on, they'll melt, it's ice cream. So this is gonna be the Fior, the white one, the chocolate and the chocolate sorbet are the first ones that I'm gonna be talking about a little bit. Because for the first part, what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about the science of gelato. And then we'll go on to some story times for the flavor ones, because I feel like a lot of people have this mystique of what flavor making is, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, but shoot any questions you want to me, and Kelsey will let me know about them as she goes through. So what's gelato? It's a frozen dessert. It is pretty much the same thing as ice cream. The more significant difference is, the short answer is that gelato has more milk than cream, so it's about half the butter fat. It was the precursor to ice cream. Ice cream is an American invention, well, adaptation, because fat lets you whip more air into it, and it travels better with higher fat content. So that was kind of this American thing of like, our country's gigantic and we need to move ice cream places. Italians don't really believe in keeping gelato, like they always have it fresh. So that's one of the differences, is the fat ratio in the milk to cream. And then the other is how it's made. And I'm gonna show you my machine. So this is Betsy. This is the barrel for Betsy. And those white things in here, those are her beaters for an ice cream maker. It's gonna be dashers that'll be a little more slender. And they are there to whip air into things. In terms of the science, we're making something that's frozen. But if you play around with the Fior, even though it's frozen and it's still cold, you can manipulate it. It's you can like squish it, you can bite into it if you wanted to. But like, here's an ice cube, super hard. Not so much for the biting, because ice is just water. When you're thinking about making ice cream or gelato, you really want to disrupt the ice crystal formation. So if you can imagine on a molecular level, all of those ions making bridges, and within the mix that you have, you need to add sugars and fats in milk, pretty much, to stop those ice crystals from having such a strong bond together. So I like to think of it as a progression from, like, you've got an ice cube, super hard, can't bite into it. But if you make popsicles are fruit and sugar, and you can still get something that's frozen and delicious, and it's a little bit more forgiving. And that's because the sugar crystals and the fructose, all of those things are preventing the water from finding each other and making such strong bonds. And then moving up from that, we have to think about the agitation of the crystals. So when I show you Betsy, like here, on a molecular level, up against this barrel, ice crystals are going to start forming, kind of like when ice crystals form on the eve of your gutters. So like, if you can imagine a stalactite kind of coming in, but tiny, and as those beaters spin, they're going to knock all of those ice crystals into the mix. And that's what makes it freeze, but it's still pretty malleable, because we're also disrupting those bonds with sugar and lactose and whatever flavors we put in there. So when you're messing around with the gelato, like, it can hold its shape, it's still a solid, it's still frozen, but what we're doing is stopping a complete solid from happening because of all of the solids that we're putting in there. So I put in the chocolate. Oh, and Fior, I don't know how many of you guys travel. It's hard doing this talking because I'm not getting feedback. Like, I'm not watching your eyes glaze over. But if you guys have traveled in Europe at all, a lot of places there will just have sweet cream. And that is as much, it's as much showing off as it is quality control. So a lot of places will have just plain cream, and part of it is they're trying to prove to you that they know what they're doing, and then on the other hand, that they're not skimping on what they do. Someone had asked if we use grass-fed milk. So that's kind of a loaded question personally, because we did do some trials of grass-fed milk. I don't know how many people here are as into food as like food science as I am, but milk itself is just as seasonal as produce is. When the cows give birth, the milk that they give is going to have an entirely different protein and fat content than during the end of the summer when they might be on hay or grass pellets. And that is super important when you're like drinking milk, or if you're a baby cow those things are super important. But because gelato is a frozen product, the temperature that we serve it at, it becomes less important for milk to be grass-fed, only because the discernible difference of it, there's a cost-benefit analysis of, do you want a product that is grass-fed but no one can actually tell, but you still have to price it to where you have to assume people can tell that it's grass-fed, even against your labeling. And that's a decision that I made. I don't want to price people out of getting something like ice cream. Where I do spend money is I try to support local when I can. Gail Hopp's Page is a goat farmer that I like to make gelato out of her cheese. There's another sheep farm that I would love, oh my stars and garters, I would love to be able to make stuff out of their milk, because they have the changes in protein are amazing. And when you listen to farmers talk about that, then you just really, you get excited for them and with them. And I would love using the products of local people, but I just use regular milk because I don't like the idea of pricing someone out. So that was a tangent, and I'm sorry about it. So you've got the Fior. The Fior is doing its thing. Where I don't skimp on is actually skim milk powder. Skim milk gelato at Splendora's is milk, heavy cream, skim milk powder, a sugar called dextrose that's really more for texture. So if you were making it home, you wouldn't necessarily need dextrose sugar. And then our stabilizer is arrowroot, guar gum, and brown rice flour. And those are things, fat does not like to hang out with water. It doesn't. It likes to sit around and be fat by itself, and you don't really get, it wants to like stay away from water as much as it can. So you use you use like gums and emulsifiers to help hold those bonds together, because otherwise the fat would want to go off on its own and it would be a frozen slushy with a layer of butter, which is not what we want. We want our lovely Fior situation. I put the 2 chocolates on there because, as much as I've been talking about solids, that chocolate sorbet doesn't have dairy in it. And the reason it can maintain the texture close to the regular chocolate is because of the amount of solids that are in there. There is a give and take for commercial production where you have to decide where your quality and price point are going to be. And there, like I said, there are places where I skimp, and then there are places where I go crazy. And the chocolate's one of those places. The cocoa powder gets made for us by a company called Forbes Chocolate in Ohio. It is a blend that has cocoa butter added back in, which cocoa butter isn't butter. It's not a dairy. In the milling process of cacao beans. And if you want to know more about chocolate, there's a couple of good places in town. I don't know how much they're open, but Jen Moad of Cocoa and Spice, she's got some really great bean to bar chocolate bars at Cocoa and Spice. So if chocolate's something that you want to know more about, get in touch with her, because she's got the people who can give probably a better seminar about chocolate than me. But going back to cocoa butter, when cacao nibs are milled, there's a fat separation that comes out, and that's what cocoa butter is. It's white chocolate, effectively. And our cocoa powder gets that added back in, and that's really more a textural help. So if you want to compare the chocolates against each other, like that's kind of where you can see how solids can help with the texture of something. Because the chocolate sorbet, it doesn't have dairy. Everyone is surprised, and it's just because the solids that we put in there, it's hot water, 2 kinds of hard chocolate, brown sugar, white sugar, and unsweetened cocoa powder. And if you've ever had our hot chocolate, that's the reason our hot chocolate kills. That's why I can give you the recipe for the hot chocolate all day long, but because our cocoa powder is made for us, the experience you're gonna have at home isn't gonna be it'll be close, but it's not gonna be quite the same. Yeah, are there any questions I should answer yet? I'm not sure.
Yeah, PK, could you remind us which chocolate is which?
The darker chocolate is going to be the chocolate sorbet. So that one's in between the strawberry and the Fior. So that one, yeah.
Can you hold them up for us?
Yeah, there's nothing though. Where's this one?
Okay, perfect.
The darker chocolate.
The only other question we've got so far is, do Italians make gelato at home?
You know, mostly they actually leave it to professionals. Italian food culture is intense. I don't know how often you get to speak to someone who is from Italy, but if you say something rude about their region, oh, you better buckle in because it's problematic. Gelato places, gelaterias, most of them are super small. Like Splendi's is kind of gigantic compared to a lot of the like mom and pop places. There are chains, there's gelato chains in Italy. There's a couple that are in New York actually. The name is escaping me, but they make all of their stuff liquid and they ship it over to their shops here because they just don't trust American ingredients, which is very Italian. Someone I think just asked what fior is. So the words fior di latte just means flower of milk. It's again, it's showing off. It's the way that gelato makers and ice cream makers, honestly, sweet cream, it's kind of how they show off to each other that they know what they're doing. Like your fior is going to be all the textural changes because there's nowhere to hide. It's just the milk. Like if I was going to be super cheap and get skim milk powder that was the absolute cheapest that I could find, which quite frankly I did when I first started, it would be metallic. It would taste like a marshmallow in a bad way because the processing of skim milk powder is a little bit delicate. So I use an organic skim milk powder just because it makes things taste better. And the fior is, there's nothing in it. There's, again, it's like it's what it is. It's cream and sugar and skim milk powder and dextrose. So there's nowhere to hide, which is kind of terrifying thing to think about. It's not super popular in America because it's hard to explain to people that it's just milk. Like everyone wants it to be vanilla, but it's just milk. Let's see. All right. Questions. So the rest of the flavors, the ones that I chose that are flavors, it's really more for like story time. I've been doing this for 14 years now. And when I started, I knew nothing. Like when I say that I knew nothing, I knew nothing. People always ask where I went to gelato school. I went to a 1-week conference at Penn State. Pennsylvania, California, Wisconsin, and Virginia have, and to some extent Michigan, but not terribly much. They have the strictest dairy laws anywhere, but Pennsylvania is insane about their dairy. So Penn State's agriculture school, they have a top-notch seminar for for ice cream and frozen things, and they don't actually teach you how to make it. They teach you a little bit about the business and the science of it. In terms of actual gelato school, there is a actual university that is a it's either a 4-month or a 6-month program. It's in Milan. It's at a company called Carpigiani. So that's an actual school. But I didn't. A lot of this is partly my science background and partly hit or miss. So the flavors that I gave you guys are kind of reflective of that. The salted caramel is the very first flavor that I ever made that I took a very long time to make, to figure out, because when I say I started at Splendora's in 2005, I didn't have classes my last semester at UVA, so I was living on the corner. I was living on 14th and Wurtland. I had 3 jobs, and otherwise I was just goofing off. So food became a big part of my Charlottesville experience, because one of my jobs was at Albemarle Baking Company. Jerry Newman was probably the best first boss to show me that when you care about your food, it comes out, and when you share that, people respond to it. So that was kind of cool having him as one of my first bosses. And salted caramel was one of the first flavors where I thought, if I can't get into culinary, if I can't make caramel, what's the point of trying to get into culinary school? Before I bought the shop, I really wanted to be a pastry chef. And caramel is just one of those things where it took forever. It took a lot of trial. Caramel is something that you can only master if you do it over and over and over and over again. So that flavor took me 7 months to make, and I'm still refining it. Like I'm not 100% on the salt that I use. I feel like there's probably a better salt out there that I can manipulate better. The next flavor that is kind of part of the Splendy story is the pink peppercorn strawberry. There's a lot that can be learned from outright theft, and pink peppercorn strawberry is one of them. Fax and Andrea Ayers, who owned the shop before me, they really supported me in so many ways. And one of the things that they did that was amazing was Fax and said, as long as I pay for the ingredients that I add in, that I could use whatever base I want. So I could use all of their product as long as the adjuncts of it I bought. So I saved money and I bought pink peppercorns and I bought local strawberries. And the very first time I made it, they were surprised that people liked it. It's gone through different iterations. I currently am slow roasting strawberries. There's always an evolution to how you use a product, especially with strawberries, because before I was just heating them a little bit with a little bit of sugar, waiting for it to get almost like jam and throwing it in. But when you do a slow roast, you're not really disrupting the cells in it. You're still taking water out. So you get a super strong concentrated flavor, and that's what I've been doing lately. This current batch are San Andreas strawberries. They are super aromatic. They've got a beautiful body to them. They're a great strawberry, and early in the season, they're amazing. Later in the season, they lose their aromaticity. Is that a word? It's a word now. But right now, they're pretty peak. And then the last flavor is the Laphroaig Earl Grey Lemon. I think that's the best flavor I've ever made. It's complex. Every single bite is different. It is not anything that I would have imagined to make, but I get a lot of inspiration from, excuse me. I get a lot of inspiration from other people who know what they're doing. This particular flavor came from a drink at Rose's Luxury. My sister and I have a tradition. We go to Rose's Luxury once a year for our birthdays in January. We didn't go this year. We had pushed it off to March and COVID happened. So we didn't get to have our Ross sister one. But every year that we go, every dinner that we have, I make a flavor inspired by that dinner. And this one came from that. It's a drink that they make there that is, the balance is a little different. I love the way that this came out, because finding the balance between these different flavors, when something is like the acid from the lemon, the smoke from the Laphroaig, the sweetness of the maple, the tannin structure from the Earl Grey, all of those things coming into balance, I honestly think it's one of my best flavors. So let's see. I'm going to answer some of the questions that are on here. What is my favorite flavor? I am boring. I like chocolate. I just like chocolate. I do. When we make the strawberries and cream, the strawberries that are cream based, I love those also. I'm from the Philippines, so when we came to America, a lot of the fruit that my mom and dad gave us was really bad because they didn't super understand apples. They just didn't know like what made a good apple, and we mostly just ate grapes because they understood grapes, and they ate oranges. We always got oranges in season, but for the rest of the fruit, everything was so different from what we could get in the Philippines that like I hate apples because my parents never picked good apples, and we only ever ate Red Delicious. But when we moved to Virginia, you could get fresh strawberries from a strawberry picking place that was near our house. And that's one of my favorite fruits is strawberries now, just because of the childhood memory of it. So the strawberry strawberry gelato, the dairy-based strawberry, and chocolate are really the only ones I eat. Let's see. In Italy, is there a lot of variance from one gelateria to another? And how do you account for that? There are pretty significant regional differences in gelato. People from the north tend to not use eggs. Legally in America, legally in America, you can still use eggs in gelato, but if it gets to 6 or 7% egg yolk, then it has to be labeled custard. But the same as it is in Italy, gelato can't be more than 10% butterfat. Most of it ends up being in the 7 to 8% range, depending, but it can't be more than 10 because then it would be ice cream. Like super premium ice cream, I think is 15, but those are legal vagaries. In Italy, it does depend on the region and it depends on the people who run it. Someone had asked how the chocolate hazelnut was made up. Before I started at Splendora's, Fax and Andrea had a flavor book of about 100, and they took a lot from traditional flavors. Gianduja is one of them. There's a region in the north part of Italy called Piemonte. They're pretty famous for hazelnuts. They've got a pretty strong tradition of nut trees in general, I think, because they've got some pretty good chestnuts too. So the Gianduja came from really that region. It's a lot like Nutella, but Gianduja is its own thing. Let's see. What else is there? Is there less sugar in gelato than ice cream? No, actually. It's about the same, only because of its necessity in keeping something the texture that it needs to be. Sugar is one of those things where if you go overboard, it will change the freezing point. And you kind of want to change the freezing point of ice cream and gelato in general, just because you want it to be able to, you want it to freeze, but not freeze too much. And sugar will be a thing that will depress that freezing point so that you can get a cold thing without it being a block of ice. How do you decide on your flavors? Whim, and also seasonality. So the fresh strawberry stuff that we use only happens in strawberry season. Blueberries, same thing, unless someone adds like 5 extra hours to a day in the summer, then I can freeze stuff to use in the future. But mostly it's seasonal. I kind of like that. It's kind of nice being able to talk to farmers and see what they're hyped about. So the goat cheese, I prefer, don't tell Gail, I prefer the fall chef. As the year goes on, the liquid content of goat milk will kind of change, so then the chev seizes differently. Sorry, that was my dog. So then the chev will seize differently, and the texture and the water content change. I like the one in the fall because it tastes more barny, but that's the one that's in the spring and the summer a lot of people like because it's a more approachable goat cheese. So that's a fun one in terms of seasonality. The ones that are boozy, sometimes people just tell me that I should make a beer into gelato and I go for it. So like if that beer is coming out in terms of a brewery's schedule, I'll go for that too. What else is there? Let's see. Oh, Splendors Closing. So that's a big one. I had originally announced that Splendora is closing in August because of lots of reasons. Some of them are personal, some of them are business oriented, but with all of this starting, I've figured out that I do love food. I love making food. And I honestly, this would be a lot easier for me personally if you guys were here to, so that I could work off of your energy. This is creepy to me, staring at my own face talking. But in terms of Splendora's closing, I would like to have a smaller footprint. Being on the downtown is emotionally difficult. We stayed open through August 12th. So it is difficult for me to continue to walk up 4th Street. So that store has a lot of amazing memories. It does. It's got, I figured out today that I have had over 300 employees, just me, because of the seasonality of Splendora's. I generally have 10 to 14 people a season. So I have had almost 300 employees. And it's a lot. It's having, I do have a lot of good memories in that building, but I would like to have a smaller footprint. We're currently doing pint and quart delivery, and something in that genre would be great. One of my gelato regulars is learning code, and she would like to try to make an app, a gelato app for us. So I'm gonna see how that goes, just because she's pretty excited about it. And it would be fun to have something subscription based of like you get 4 classics a month, or you get 4 weird ones, or you get 4 seasonal ones. That would be an interesting model to do. Someone says, oh, basil. We have a panna cotta basil right now. It is a panna cotta is cooked cream, and then basil, we use a basil sugar. It's sugar mixed with basil that has been dehydrated, so I get that from a vendor. But if I had a dehydrator, I'd probably make it myself. Let's see. What type of teas make the best gelato? All of them. It's weird. No, that's not actually true. What type of teas make the best gelato? Black teas are great. Things where my science background comes in handy is that I can look up food science journals and have enough understanding of them to manipulate them. So things with volatile aromatics, those take a lot of finessing. So something delicate, like a white tea or an oolong or even pu'er. Those are things that are gonna have like a ton of volatile aromatics, and they'll be slightly different than with the black teas, which will take a little bit of punishment. The tannin structure in a black tea lends itself to just like, you can beat the living hell out of those things and get the flavor out. So like the Earl Grey, I just steeped it. But with something like jasmine, something like a white tea, I've used a silver needle white tea. Those are going to take a ton of finessing, and sometimes you have to worry about whether or not it's alcohol soluble versus fat soluble. That's one of the issues I came up with when I tried to use caraway, because I'm not 100% certain that caraway is fat soluble. I think I might have to make a caraway extract, because it might just be something that's alcohol soluble, and I can't just throw it in cream and hope. Fats are great just because they kind of will hold on to things that you need them to. I have a very horrible explanation, and I'm so sorry that it's morbid. There's this book called Perfume, The Story of a Murderer. And in it, he learns how to be a perfume maker, and he uses fat to try to capture the smells of the women he murders. I'm so sorry that that's the only explanation I can think of, but fats will take a lot of volatile aromatics and hold them in. So like if you had a cut onion next to a stick of butter, not touching, just next to each other, the butter is gonna take a lot of the smell from that cut onion, because that is what fats do. That was probably a better example than the murder one, so I'm sorry about that. What is my science background? I majored in shapes, actually. No, I have a biology degree in molecular genetics. Yeah, I would have lived in a lab and worried about whether deletions and transpositions in mRNA, when genes are being copied, would change protein structures and cause illness and or changes in the protein. It was fun while I studied it. I don't know that I would go back to it. It's gone. When I was in college, CRISPR, which I don't know if you guys hear a lot of things about gene therapy and things like that, but CRISPR was just starting, and now everyone uses the applications for it are insane and way above my head. But that's my science background. Is I like to tell people I majored in shapes. Let's see. How do I find the fruit to use? I wander around the market, the city market. Well, when wandering around a market was allowed, I like wandering around the city market and getting to talk to people. I usually go early in the morning. And that's the time when the farmers do have a second to like tell you about things. So the strawberry thing is from Chuck at Agriberry, who is delightful. I love him. I'm really grateful to get to know him, because he will get hyped on things. Like I walk, City Market is in that parking lot. Well, it was in that parking lot, and I would walk my dog at like 5, 6 in the morning past the parking garage, and sometimes I'd hear PK, and it would be Chuck, and he would have like something in his hand, and he'd like, try this, put this in your mouth. And so he's the one that got me to actually eat cherries, because I don't like cherries. So they had really good Rainier cherries 3 years ago, and he just like told me to put it in my mouth and try it, and I did. So I made gelato out of it. I work a lot off of what other people are excited about, because when people are specialized and excited, they will share it. And that's the interconnected part of the Charlottesville food scene that I don't know that I could leave it anymore. Because like not getting to be part of it physically right now makes me realize how much I love it. That's that, yeah. Let's see, how does alcohol affect the freezing process? Good question, Sarita. Hello, say hi to Jay. Alcohol depresses the freezing point. So I can't use too much. A lot of people were concerned about the boozy one. I use a shot and a half in a gallon. So like you could theoretically get drunk off of it if you can eat a gallon of gelato as fast as you can take a shot. So you could get drunk off of these things. Alcohol, in using alcohol, if you want the flavor, like I could burn it off, like a good bourbon or medium bourbon, not a good bourbon. I could burn the alcohol off and the flavor profile will still be there enough to use in a gelato, but I usually just use small amounts of things that have an intense flavor. So like if I'm gonna do tequila, I'll try to use añejo or reposado, which are aged, rather than a silver, which is a young tequila that's gonna have a ton of alcohol bite and not necessarily a flavor profile. So yeah, when I say depresses the freezing point, I just mean that water will freeze at 0. That's our general line. And then like adding sugar. So water needs to be at like negative something to freeze, or adding salt. And then adding alcohol. Alcohol itself, I think that alcohol freezes at -30. Starts to freeze. I don't think that it freezes all the way until you get into the hundreds. Like if you wanted like a frozen block of ethyl alcohol, I think that you need to get to -200, but I'd have to Google that because I'm not 100% certain. What flavor creation has surprised you with customer reaction, either positive or negative? I have a good story about that. The time that someone spat ghost pepper honey raspberry into my actual face. They didn't mean to, it wasn't unkind, but I warned her that it was spicy, and she did not account for that, but it was ghost peppers that were steeped in honey with raspberries folded in, and she spat it right into my face. So that was a surprise. Positive reactions. The basil panna cotta is insanely popular, and I never would have imagined that ever. Yeah, that's not a thing that I thought that people would go for, and they did. I actually made up that flavor because I had run out of the ingredients for another flavor, and we just happened to have basil sugar. So that one was a beautiful and glorious mistake. Have I considered a COVID flavor contest? I would need details on what that would be. Like, is it like a pantry challenge? Like, do I have the contents of someone's pantry to try to make a flavor out of? Because I would kind of be into that. I like the weird things. I like the things that surprise people themselves when they like it. That is my favorite part of making gelato. Let's see, what's my best-selling flavor? Chocolate. It bucks the trend, which I love. Thax and Andrea are themselves, and I mean that in the best possible way. Andrea had a chocolate cake for her wedding, and I think that her mother was upset that it wasn't white, but they love chocolate, and chocolate is our biggest seller. The industry trend is for vanilla. People just kind of like, vanilla goes with everything, but we far and away, just by kilograms and kilograms, make more chocolate than any other flavor. I love that. That's awesome. So I think people have good taste around here. What temp are our cabinets at Splendora's? That's a good question. The usual thing for gelato. So the best tasting gelato you'll ever have will be right when it comes out of the machine. It comes out of the machine at about 20 degrees, which is warm enough that your tongue can have every nuanced flavor ever. It's kind of funny. One of my friends told me that I should just have, we have a smaller machine. It only makes about 2 quarts at a time, that I should just have that up front and charge extra for fresh pistachio, because as good as our pistachio is, when it's out of the machine, it's magical. But our serving temperature for the two cabinets, we're actually keeping it a little bit colder. In Italy, they will serve at 15. And we keep ours at 10 and 12. So the fruit case, the one that's closer to the register, if you guys are familiar with Splendoras, that one will have the sorbets in it. We keep that a little bit colder. The sorbets don't have much to protect them in terms of fat. They're technically fat. Well, not the chocolate sorbet. The chocolate sorbet has fat from the chocolate. But the fruit sorbets have nothing to protect them, so we keep it a little bit colder than probably an Italian would care for. The other case, we keep it about 12 just because cones are pretty popular, and with the size that we have, we need to keep it a little bit colder than it would be in Italy. When is peach gelato season? That's going to depend on the weather. I don't know what this freeze did to anything. I love peaches also, and like if the weather was like this all of the time, where it was a nice, warm, windy, sunny day going into a cooler night, that's when stone fruit just live their best lives. So if it hadn't been for the frost this past weekend, I would say we were in for a really good peach season. I'm not sure anymore what it's going to be like. I think that the frost was late enough that the trees could mostly protect themselves. So we're just going to see how that goes. Hopefully I'll get to go out to a couple orchards. I go to Henley and Childs out in Crozet. Henley gets some really great white peaches. Whatever varietal they plant are beautiful. So it's just going to depend on them and what their growing process is going to be for peach season. I also love peach season. I love yellow peaches. We make peach Bellini sorbet, which is white peaches with champagne. So that one kills too. Do Italians put toppings on their gelato? I don't know. I honestly don't. I have never been to Italy. My parents have been to Italy. My father went to a gelato place in Rome and proudly told them that his daughter makes gelato, and they just kind of stared at him. But I've never been to Italy myself, so I would not know. That would be an adventure to go to. I would love to go to Piemonte. Everything I love that's Italian is from Piemonte. It's yeah, every cheese, a ton of the wine I love. I think one of my favorite wineries is either in Piemonte or Alto Adige. So going to Italy would be great, and I'll find out about toppings if I get a chance to go over there eventually one day. Have I ever made a flavor using corn, wine, or whiskey? Yes, yes, and yes. The wine that I'm currently trying is Park Vineyard. So they're in Earlysville. This is their Spark. It's a Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Petit Verdot blend. I had done something with they have a white blend called Fuse, and this is something that I'm kind of, I have to drink. My life is hard. I have to drink this to figure out if I can do anything with it. So I've been kind of sipping on it and thinking of what I can add. Something with corn, we did a sweet corn. It was okay. I feel like I could do better. And then with whiskey, you're having one of my whiskey things now. We also do a bourbon peach. Sometimes I like to go to the Alley Light and just get cocktails and try to recreate those cocktails as ice cream or as gelato. So I do things with those. Let's see. Any interesting stories about flavors that were epic failures? Yeah, there are. I tried to make chicken and waffles, and it was close. I got close. but the chicken skin wasn't what I wanted it to be, because I had made a hot ham biscuit flavor for for a friend, and that turned out beautifully. Like, it tasted like biscuit. I used butterfat solids. So I used butterfat solids and browned butter and hot sauce and honey. And I had baked prosciutto in the oven until it was crisp beyond belief. And it tasted like a hot ham biscuit as a flavor. It was delicious. But the chicken skin is really messing me up on a chicken and waffle one. So those trials haven't come out well. Let's see. Oh, someone had asked what the weirdest flavor I would ever want to do was. And I don't know that there is a point. Like, is there a weirdest? Short of using something illegal, I don't think that anything is too weird to try. So if you can think of something weird, maybe we'll figure it out. Yeah, let's see. What other flavors should I answer, Kelsey? Or what questions? Vegetable gelato. I've done that. Carrot is a great one. Parsnip is a wonderful idea. I believe that parsnips are the candy of the root vegetable family, so that would be interesting. I did a really fun carrot and cheese gelato. One of my employees had asked me to do a cheese week, and one of the things that we did was it was an aged hard cheese, but I'm forgetting which one I used, but it was a carrot juice gelato with cheese folded into it. And it was actually pretty good. It was violently orange, which I think stopped a lot of people from wanting to try it, but I thought it was delicious. Let's see.
DK, what about, could you talk a little bit about the foraged foods you've made gelato out of?
Yeah, that's a great one. Pawpaws are, so that's one of the ones that I had never heard of. There's a lot of things that I've never heard of that I make stuff out of now. Pawpaws are one of those fruits that I had no idea what they were until someone mentioned it, and then Leslie at Planet Earth Diversified just put some in my bag once, and I asked her what the heck they were, and she's like, they're pawpaws, just eat them. And then Jen Naylor, who runs Sussex Farm, lost her mind when she told me that, asked me if I would make ice cream or gelato for her, and she gave me an entire giant box of them so I could make gelato a few years ago, and it turned out well. But in terms of other foraging, red buds, that was great. I don't know how to describe them in a way that would safely allow you to forage them, but red buds are early spring flowers. You see them everywhere. They're decorative. They're also edible. They're great in salads, but I did a lemon passion fruit sorbet with red buds folded in for a collaboration with Chim Taste, and I would love to do that again next year. Like, I would love to make that for other people when the season happens. Seasonality, I am always tardy to the party when it comes to seasonality. I try to remember when things are coming up, but sometimes I just don't. And red buds, I only started picking them right at the beginning of the season and then right at the end of the season, so I didn't quite harvest enough to do something for everyone. I've been doing a lot of stuff with putting branches in vodka. That sounds strange, but it's a good way to make extract. Birch sticks, black birch, sweet birch, takes really well to fat. So if I ever get a chance to go out and find a black birch, I could probably forage some of those sticks and steep them in cream. It tastes a lot like root beer. It's delicious. Sassafras. black locust is in bloom right now. Black locust are the trees with the hanging, they kind of look like wisteria, but they're not. They smell completely different. But locust blossom sugar, you can add that to things too. Yeah, I don't know. There's some things that are delicious by themselves, but once you start manipulating them to make them into a flavor adjunct, they lose their magic. So like Maypops are great, but I can't really do anything with them because the flavor just gets lost entirely with the sugar content that I add for like a sorbet. Yeah. Do I make our own? I do not. We don't make our own cones, no. We just buy them from a place in Waynesboro.
Say, PK, we have probably time for one more question if you want to pick one from the list.
So what new flavors am I contemplating? Any combinations that are particularly problematic? New flavors only ever come to me when I'm eating with people. I really would like to do things in collaboration. So mostly I'm kind of casting around for people to give me ideas of what they'd like to see, especially like a producer. Ian Redshaw, when he was cooking at Lampo and Prime, he was a great resource for me because he's also insane. He's a crazy person and I love him dearly. And he says things like, hey, will you make fish sauce caramel? And then I say, okay. So future flavors, I would love any chef or producer out there to just kind of ask me to make something with what they have, because that's my favorite part of being in this food community. So I guess we're wrapping up, and I do want to thank all of you guys again for sitting here listening to me babble. Honestly, I feel like I should have told you guys more about all of the flavors, but this is a difficult format for me. And I'm glad that y'all hung in there with all of this. Thank you. For Splendora's, all of our information is going to be on Instagram. It is the easiest platform for me to share things. So if you're not following us on Instagram, go on there. We post the new flavor list every Monday. And then the delivery windows are on Saturdays and Sundays for pints and quarts. So I guess that's it. I don't know what else, Kelsey. Do you have any questions, Kelsey?
Hey, you're doing curbside pickup too, right?
Yeah, we do curbside pickup Wednesday through Sunday, 12 to 6.
Okay. So is the best way for us to call the shop to place orders?
No, it's the phone at the shop does not do well. So it's actually my phone number. If I called or texted you today with a 757 number, use that one.
Awesome. I think, thank you so much for telling us about all the flavors. I'm glad you talked about more than just what we were trying, because I think we're going to try to get in on some of these pints and this weekend to try some more. And I think, judging from everyone's feedback, thank you everyone for submitting questions. We got through a bunch of them. They were fantastic. They really kept this rolling. And PK, I don't know if you can see it, but we just have a lot of thanks coming in from everybody
cool.
for doing this for us. So yeah, I'd like to echo that. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you everyone who has tuned in for joining us for this event and making it so successful. I hope you all have a great evening.
Yeah, thanks guys.